Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robin Pennington. I'm the Chief of Staff to Steve Relier, who is the Executive Vice Chancellor and CFO at the California State University System Office in Long Beach. Steve was on the CFO panel earlier today, and I think they all did a great job. We will go ahead and get started now because I know that this is the last session before our reception this evening. So with that, I will go ahead and introduce Greg Bedell. Greg is the Managing Director in Huron's Higher Education Consulting Practice. Greg and his co-presenters will discuss efforts in higher education that are demonstrating greater efficiency and effectiveness. Greg has worked in higher education, healthcare, government, and nonprofit institutions throughout his 20-plus year career, and has worked with more than 35 premier research universities and nonprofit organizations. At different points within his career, Greg has worked on projects that span nearly every functional area within the university. He and his team specialize in assisting universities with cost reduction, organizational redesign, operational process improvement, strategic assessments, and compliance matters. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Greg to introduce his team.
Thank you very much, Robin. Appreciate the kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to have you here. And as Robin indicated, seems like we're between you and social hour. So we're going to do our best to have a nice, lively discussion. Share information, share ideas. We definitely want to do what we can to make this interactive. And initially when Mike Redmond asked me if we'd like to present and be part of this, I said, sure, absolutely. This is what, our firm, so I don't know to what degree folks know about Huron, but Huron Consulting Group it's a consulting firm based out of Chicago, and one of our divisions is focused on higher education. And we have 350 consultants that essentially each day, day in and day out, they're all across the country working with our higher education clients on a variety of matters, be it strategic, financial in nature, budgeting, operational efficiency, systems, you name it, we pretty much run the gamut. And we've been doing this since our inception 12 years ago. And then certainly many of us, we came from prior firms and have been doing this for a long time. And so focusing on higher education is what we do. And so, when I had this opportunity to be part of this conference, and to share ideas and to learn. I think we come to these things where we go to the NACUBOs and CURAs and EDUCAUSE conferences, just like I'm sure many of you do. We like to share what we're doing in the industry, what we're seeing, the challenges our clients are having. We like to learn from our clients. We like to hear what our clients are challenged with and some of the ideas that they have. And so this has just been we're just pleased to be here and be part of this event to share knowledge and talk about efficiencies and collaboration and some of the important topics that have been top of mind, all day today and will be tomorrow as well. So quickly, since I've already had an introduction, I'm going to have each of my panelists do a quick intro of themselves and provide a little background on who they are and the perspective they bring. And really, the reason I brought all of them is because I wanted to bring a broad perspective. I think you'll hear very quickly that everybody on this panel, although we all work together and we collaborate, we all have very different experiences, and I think that's the intent. What I wanted to do in this session is to really go through a sort of a facilitated discussion and ask questions where we're all going to provide our perspectives on certain topics around collaboration, efficiencies, and things of that nature. So with that, I'm going to turn to my right.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Ryan McDaniel. I'm a managing director in our higher education practice. I'm one of the leaders of what we call our Enterprise Transformation Services group. What I really do, and probably the easiest way to explain it, is and one of my hats I wear, I coordinate all of Huron's work with the University of California system. And right now, one of the biggest initiatives we're working on, any of you from UC will know, is UC Path, which is an initiative to come to one set of standardized HR payroll processes across the whole UC system, implement shared services, and put in PeopleSoft HR payroll to support that. So I lead our team on that. We've also led some other large kind of transformational projects in UC around Last year we did a project to design a new common chart of accounts that eventually the whole UC system will migrate to, campus by campus over time. I can talk about that, and it was a large change management effort. We've also done things around putting in composite benefit rates for the whole UC system, and then I've worked for the last 10 years with a lot of the individual campuses on, I would say transformation initiatives that affect the campus level. So we can talk more about that later on.
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Fennell. I am a director in Huron's strategy and operations practice within higher education. Unlike several of my colleagues here, I'm a little bit more of a generalist and have a pretty broad exposure to both a number of different types of institutions as well as a number of different types of challenges and problems. Really happy to be here and share some of those experiences. I've been with Huron doing this for about the last 7 years, and some of my exposure with higher education in the state. I spent about 6 months with UCSF helping them consider and redesign a budget process. This would have been back in about 2008 or so, and then spent a little bit of time with them as well developing business cases for a new funding model for their development office, as well as a case for increased funding for graduate students at the school. And then more recently, spent some time at the Extension School at UCLA helping them just assess their IT infrastructure as well.
So I'm Kelly Fager. I'm also a director in Huron's higher education practice, and I focus on procurement, really doing procurement operations, doing organizational assessments, technology, doing some strategic sourcing, and travel and expense management as well. I've been in procurement for about 15 years. I've been with Huron for 4, working with a whole host of different schools, all the way from private universities to large state public research institutions and large university systems as well.
Good afternoon, I'm Tim Patterson. I am a senior director with Huron Consulting Group. I've been with the firm now for 12 years, since its inception. Next May, I will celebrate my 20th year in the industry of higher education. Before Huron, I worked for another consulting firm, and then before that, I actually worked for a university once upon a time. My primary area of focus is research administration, and so I usually deal with all things research admin, whether that's pre-award, post-award, compliance-related matters, IRB. That's my niche. I've worked for, UCSF and University of California, Berkeley, 2 of the UC schools, and back in 1989, I am proud to say that I attended one of the California community colleges down in the Los Angeles area for about 6 months or so before I went out of state for college. So I'm a big fan of the California community colleges. Back to you, Greg.
All right, thank you guys. Appreciate that. So, one of the things, that there's sort of been a common theme in today's discussions so far, and as perhaps is evident, there's an awful lot that's been written about higher education. I think it's pretty safe bet you can open the Chronicle or any other periodical that speaks about education on any given day and see some pretty interesting things being written about the state of higher education and what's going on out there. But the way I want to get this started, we're going to throw a little bit of a softball question to folks, and so just have each of the panelists elaborate a little bit on what are the challenges that their clients are seeing. I think there's probably going to be some common themes. It's probably going to be very similar to what's going on here in the state. But maybe just a few words on some of the challenges, Ryan, that you're seeing with your client. The things that they're seeing.
Sure. I think the most prevailing theme is, there's a lot of spotlight and focus on the higher education industry right now. We're used to, like you mentioned, the Chronicle and reading about it in, domain-specific periodicals, but right now it's top of the news, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and there's a kind of a double arm's length view of people coming in saying, oh, you gotta, increase performance, increase student outcomes, all these financial pressures and constraints. But the reality is that all of us live working in the industry there's this juxtaposed position of all these regulatory burdens and compliance issues that it makes it very hard to affect the change that the world's calling for. So to me, the most prevailing kind of issue right now and challenge is how do we address what we're hearing and the pressures we're facing given the constraints that we're working in. That can be process, compliance, technology across the board.
Adam, any thoughts?
So I won't go over a lot of what's been written. I mean, what I find really interesting about where higher education is at the moment is really the knowledge, the skills, the abilities of both at the individual and organizational levels to be successful in this kind of new normal of increased competition, faster change. more financial pressure, the pressure to do more with less, and continue to be efficient, and to make the right bets in the right areas for growth, and how different those requirements are from what we all might describe as sort of the traditional model of higher ed being a bit more static and a bit less dynamic, and so there's a pretty substantial gap between the organizational capabilities that have sort of emerged in over the last several decades, and really what's going to be required to be successful over the next several. And so that sort of intersection for me is I think one of the biggest challenges for universities to face is as Ryan mentioned, is sort of the change component there across a huge range of dimensions, from how you consider your students, how you consider your alumni, how you compete and recruit for students, how you look at yourselves as well. So it's across a ton of dimensions.
Yeah, I mean, being in procurement, right, the biggest issue for us is just the state budget cuts or the state appropriation cuts, sequestration, all those things that are essentially cutting down those revenues, and people looking to procurement to say, hey, how can you get us those cost savings to reinfuse those savings back into the mission of the university, whether that's teaching or research. And so a lot of it, from a procurement perspective, is really just trying to help find that savings so we can sort of stay afloat in some cases.
Yeah, the increasing demand for services amongst the constrained resources. I mean, that's a point that Ryan brought up. Certainly the demand for sophisticated solutions. We live in a world where we all have an iPhone or something similar, or an iPad, and we can download our bank statements from our iPad, and yet we can't go to the general ledger and get access to information on the awards that we manage, or budgets, or those kinds of things. And so that increasing demand for those sophisticated solutions that institutions are really struggling to provide to ultimately the customers, the users, the principal investigators are out there, the faculty, the staff. I think that's something that certainly is one of the challenges.
And I think I would add two points. I think one that I would add, sort of tagging on with Tim's thoughts, is it's really sort of the increasing sophistication of students, frankly. And you think about the technology that's out there, the use of social media, the ways that a student can be informed, and the access to information that they have. And I think I have a number of clients that are constantly lamenting how they can stay one step ahead of the students in terms of what's going on in the institution, and understanding how they need to serve those students. The other piece of it that I think this happens in an increasing amount is it's not just the budget cuts, but I think personally what I'm seeing is sort of this intrusion from from the legislative levels, if you will. I think I had a client last year where a subcommittee of the legislature essentially said, University X, we think you're very administratively bloated, and we want you to tell us you're not. And so we spent a large amount of time working with that institution to really understand their cost structure in the specific areas of HR, IT, procurement, and finance, and help them to understand how did they stack up. We did benchmarking and looked at some of their peer institutions, and really then went back to be able to present back to the board so that they could also then present to the legislature and say, hey, this is what an objective third party has to say about where we stand. So I think that's part of it. I think another piece that I think we're seeing as well, and again, this differs, institution by institution and state by state, but a lot more activity by boards, and so seeing board members take a very active role in, thinking about what's going on in the institutions and saying, hey, are we operating efficiently? Are our costs too high? What do we need to do about enrollments, revenue, et cetera? And so there's that again, there's other forces that are really putting increased pressure on our client base, and we're reacting to that and working with our clients pretty continually. So with that, so there's all these challenges out there. We've enumerated some of them, talked about them. So I'll turn to my panel and say, ask this question. So given all the challenges, what are the initiatives? What are the kinds of things that you're seeing your clients do to try and deal with the challenges in the environment, to really address the cost pressures, the revenue pressures, et cetera? Why don't we go down that route? And I'll start. Adam, maybe you want to go?
Sure, absolutely. So you're clearly going to get some selection bias in this, and it's not meant to be fully representative. But I think there are two areas that I think that I'm having a lot of conversations about. One, broadly speaking, I'll call asset optimization. That's really looking at both the physical assets of a university or institution and the people that work and contribute there. On the physical plant, sort of space optimization side, clearly there's increased pressure and attention to how is space being utilized. Where is it efficiently allocated? Where is it not? Many campuses have a number of off-campus leases. While they're not, still not optimizing the space that they have available to themselves. What are the incentives attendant to how space is consumed and allocated on campus, and are those incentives aligned with institutional missions? How is space financed, and are institutions taking advantage of public-private partnerships and other financing options to create the sorts of facilities that they need to execute their missions? On the people side, it's how are you organized to do the work you need to do, and how are you ensuring that the people in those organizations are allocated to their best and most productive uses? I mean, at its most fundamental level, and I think there are a lot of different ways in which those broadly manifest themselves in terms of projects and approaches. But I think in terms of the broad themes, I think that's the first sort of section on optimization of assets. The second, this will probably be a little bit different than some of my fellow panelists, is in the area of what I call, or I'm calling, educational innovation. And that starts small and goes to some of the sort of big business model type questions. One of the things that struck me, I think the ACT just came out with a study that showed that 26% of graduating seniors are what they called college ready. I mean, it's a pretty astonishing number. And so many institutions, from community colleges to large research comprehensives, are having to deal with approaches to remediation. Students who are have a want and a need to receive tertiary education, but aren't necessarily ready for it. And so it clearly adds complexity with respect to how you schedule classes and a potentially incremental cost to institutions. Several clients and folks with whom I'm speaking are considering credits for MOOCs for lower level undergraduate courses. And so significant both opportunity for some of these institutions, way to change the cost curve for students as well, but clearly fundamental questions about what's the business model of those particular institutions and how might this affect that. And then on the broad scale, we've helped the University of Wisconsin design the operational capacity to support things like competency-based education. So no credit hours, students start the first of every month, move through as quickly as they'd like. And what does that mean for how you might organize as sort of an administrative operation to support that? And how might institutions consider global opportunities in the context of what their domestic opportunities look like as well? So I think that's the long answer to your question, Grant. Thanks.
Yeah, I think from a procurement perspective, a lot of the conversations I've been having lately is really around the organization. So the organizational structure, certainly in capacity to some extent, with the budget cuts that these universities are facing. But it's also turned into a bit of a dialogue around the competencies of those procurement resources in particular. So we may have, potentially, the technologies in place from a procurement perspective to drive some efficiencies and some cost savings. But we don't necessarily have the competencies intact today to really become sort of quote-unquote strategic and to really drive and build data-driven business cases to find the areas to save money. So if we think about these really hefty topics like facilities and construction, right? Utilities, benefits, those types of commodities, we really are looking for folks who know how to mine the data, understand it, and really be able to take action that's effective on it. And that's not to say that the transactions of a PO, and an invoice and those types of things still need to happen. We certainly still need that function to happen. But the conversations I've been having with a lot of universities lately really revolve around, okay, now how do we then tackle sort of true strategic sourcing and really make a big, sizable impact for my university who's suffering from these budget cuts?
Tim, anything to add?
Yeah, so from a research admin's perspective, I've been spending a lot of time doing assessments, and there could be assessments that are sort of campus-wide, there could be assessments that are looking at just one particular department or one particular function, but institutions really taking a look at how are we doing things? Do we have the right process in place? Do we have the right policy in place? Is our policy outdated? Does it need to be updated? Do we have the right organizational structure in place, the reporting lines, things like roles and responsibilities distribution throughout the organization? Do we have the right roles and responsibilities identified Do people understand what those roles are? Are they doing too much? Are they doing not enough? How are they ultimately serving the customers, the PIs out there? Certainly they're asking questions about technology. Do we have the right technology in place to support the mission of this office? Do we need to make a technology upgrade, or do we need to somehow enhance or change the technology that we're using? And a lot of questions being asked around shared services. Certainly departments out there looking for ways to band together and look at doing certain things around a shared service model, whether it is ranging from a particular, for example, a pre-award effort, pulling together department administrators, like a few individuals to support pre-award for a larger group of PIs, whether it is on the post-award side doing things like the research administration for a large number of PIs, but the shared services topic seems to certainly be one that's very popular right now.
I think the most underlying theme of what I'm seeing and talking to leaders about are how to use all the data that exists in your guys' ecosystems and your businesses. And it leads to several different paths. I mean, a lot of it can be, how do we put just baseline metrics in place to judge, how many transactions are happening, and could we, gain process efficiency from that. Some of it's looking at, cost of instruction and programs. Some of it's helping to build business cases around IT rationalization and, the idea of we put together really good structured services from a central standpoint that have a good cost model and basis to it. Will that motivate all the decentralized units to, not have their, the IT units out in their shops and to move to, a more centralized model? So that's probably the most prevailing theme of what I'm seeing across all the work we're doing.
I think the thing that I would add, and I think some of the perspective I have has really been focused on a lot of work in the cost reduction space in recent years. So clearly there's a lot of clients that we have that are looking at cost reduction and thinking about how do we look broadly across the institution? How do we do this in sort of a quick way to sort of take a look and figure out, where are there opportunities? What, for cost reduction? How do we find those opportunities, zero in on the ones that really have the biggest potential, prioritize those and go after those? And so I'm seeing a fair amount of that kind of discussion happen. I'm also seeing, there's a large public system east of California somewhere who was a client of mine that they actually took an interesting approach, and what they did is they sort of funded it out of the system office, and they said, we're going to allocate, a certain amount of dollars to each campus, and then each campus, what we'd like you to do is take that money, get some outside help, and look at yourselves, assess yourselves broadly, or look at the 3 or 4 areas that you think are problematic, and and help them move towards sort of a self-assessment and figuring out where they could be more efficient, where they could do things differently. What's interesting about that, and maybe not surprisingly, that this initiative as it happened, and not all the institutions have gone through it yet, but probably I don't know, a third or more have. There are themes that are starting to emerge where now all of these institutions are saying, well, we have this problem in human resources, or we have this problem in, whatever, pick a functional area that they looked at. And across all the institutions, they're saying the same things. And so now they're starting to talk. So now the business officers and everyone, they're starting to say, well, wait a minute, maybe there's an opportunity for us to do something together about this problem. We all have the same problems. We're all in the same state. We're all part of the same system. So maybe there's something that we can do. And so it took that initiative for them to sort of get to the point where, oh, hey, here's the areas that might be ripe for collaboration. So it was one sort of interesting observation that I think the collaboration has been really successful in this model, and it's worked very well. So moving a little bit further, the next question sort of gets into this. So we were talking about, sort of like broad initiatives. So what are the specific initiatives, and I'm asking my team on this, that really help, the clients focus on the broad enterprise? I mean, do you have any examples or good, and I think this is where it'd be helpful to get some examples to the assembled group here on, a good enterprise-wide example and something you're seeing or that you've been involved with in the industry. Ryan?
Sure. So I think for those that are here in UC, the UC Path initiative is the biggest, largest from a scale and resources perspective that's happening right now, and that I'm personally involved with. And What's interesting about that is, right, it was, the project was started and conceived as an idea of, right, we can rationalize a lot of costs by going to, one set of unified HR payroll business processes. We'll put in shared services. We'll put in new technology to replace, these 14, 15 different existing legacy systems. And the reality is, as you get into the project, is what really has come through is just the goals change from let's not rationalize all these dollars right away. Let's look at getting everybody on one set of processes. And I don't want to say it's incrementally, it's incremental, efficiency and the collaboration that happens on that of just getting everybody in a room together and saying, all right, this is how we're going to do this labor distribution process for payroll, and having 15 different organizations hammer through that. Going through that has really created a lot of other opportunities for collaboration and sharing. And you see the campuses are very different levels of centralization and decentralization. So it's opened up all kinds of new opportunities through this one kind of system-wide mandated initiative, and it's been good to see a lot of the campuses work together in that regard.
Yeah, I think from a procurement perspective as well, cost savings is obviously one giant component, but there's other components where we have to be so intimately tied to our end users and our campus stakeholders. And we need to collaborate with our own campuses before we can really start to move the needle in any way. And so I think, I'm thinking about another university I worked with this winter. They were really trying to identify those cost savings, but they also had other sort of issues that surfaced as they did that. They also needed to make sure that the suppliers that they chose were of the right quality to the PI specifications, right? They had to make sure that they were compliant with the federal government, that they had been TIN matched, and that they were not on the debarred list and those types of things where they had issues like that to work out. And so I think from a procurement perspective, obviously cost savings, to sort of reinfuse that in the mission, is sort of central to what we do. But in terms of collaboration and procurement, it's just so fundamental that we work with our key stakeholders to truly understand those business requirements to be able to successfully meet those and ultimately, drive those savings for the university.
Tim, anything to add on that? Okay. I think the one thing I will add, and I'm going to throw on my research hat, I've done a little bit of work in research administration. I think, I've been involved in a couple of different system initiatives. I think technology oftentimes it can be that catalyst for collaboration. And so, who in here, who's in the research space and knows what effort reporting is? Anybody ever hear effort reporting? So 1, 2 hands, wow, not a lot. Okay, so, so effort reporting is a compliance requirement for research institutions, and we have a number of different systems that have said, hey, you know what, this is a compliance requirement. This is something the federal government's throwing at us. There's all sorts of them. Tim could list off the, half a dozen or more, maybe a dozen, I don't know. You tell me how many different compliance requirements that are needed. And where they've said, there's no reason we need to have, 5, 15, whatever, the number happens to be, different ways of handling this issue. It's an administrative hassle, it's burdensome on faculty, et cetera. Why don't we get together and figure out, let's start at the top. Let's talk about establishing common policy about how we deal with this particular compliance topic across our system. Let's look at, the underlying technology we use and figure out, hey, is there something that can support all of us? Can we manage it centrally, et cetera? And so really taking some of those things and saying, hey, we don't have to be unique to deal with a federal, compliance requirement, because it's the same requirement for all of us. There's no real reason we should do it differently. And so I've seen that in a number of different areas, whether it's effort reporting or how you're dealing with IRBs or IACUC or other, compliance protocols. It does, technology, when you're trying to make something more efficient, can be sort of that catalyst to help collaboration in many regards. And I've seen that a number of different times. One other interesting thing that, just again, also in the research space, one of my clients is UT Arlington. And they did this interesting thing several years ago. And again, they're a small research organization, but they have ambitions to grow. They want to get more into the research, world, as do many institutions. And they built this system that was, it's changed names a couple of times, but it's essentially now it's called the Mentis system, and it's intended to be an inventory of all of the sort of technical know-how that their faculty have. So they built this sort of framework that says we're going to capture all the expertise that all of our faculty members and our researchers have. And if somebody's an expert and has expertise in nanotechnology, we want to know that, and we want it easily accessible across the entire university or any outside institution that comes in and is looking for nanoscientists. We also want to know all about our lab space. We want to know all about the equipment we have, if we have special lasers or other equipment that is used in research, so that we have that sort of supply of research expertise so that we can increase our ability to collaborate across the institution. They've built something that's in sort of a beta format right now. They call it the collaborative partnership, I believe what it is, and where they've gone sort of regionally outside of the UT system, but to some of the other Texas schools that are in the greater Dallas Metroplex area and over into Lubbock, Texas, and some of those other places, and said, hey, if you want to be part of this, then we can all start to band together a little bit and say, how do we share the expertise, knowledge, equipment, assets, et cetera, that we have? And I said, so I think that's a very interesting and innovative thing that they're doing. It's definitely focused on collaboration. It's definitely focused on keeping costs down and so forth. So just, an interesting story that I thought I'd share with the group. But I think, there's a lot of interesting things going on out there around collaboration. I'm going to sort of move a little bit into kind of the discussion of, okay, so how do you get a major change initiative started, or how we're talking about collaborative, we're talking about the kinds of examples of different efficiency projects and so forth that we're seeing our clients tackle. And I'd ask my panelists to maybe weigh in and say, what's your experience? How do these initiatives get started? And is there a secret sauce, or is it just dependent on the institution? Ryan, you want to jump in?
Sure. For me, I think it's always about addressing pain. That's what usually gets things to actually move the needle, when there's common agreement on there's pain in this process, or the pain could be an outside force like regulatory compliance, something like that coming in, or loss of funding. But that's what really kind of initiates both at the ground level that a lot of us work at every day, right, that we're dealing with, and at the top level, and what kind of creates that synergy that will lead to getting an initiative started. So to me, when I look at how you guys want to go and start something, or start thinking about what is your pain, what is frustrating every day, the challenges you have, and then start thinking about who shares in that with you, and how can you find others that you can work towards common goals to start to alleviate that.
Tim, how about?
Sure. No, I'll jump in. So clearly there's the top up and bottom down, and one of the things that I wanted to talk about related to this topic is kind of below the bottom, if you will, and it's I think there are two elements. One, you all have massive resources available to you, both in the faculty and students, at your institutions. It's humbling when you show up as the management consultant, and the student worker in the office is smarter than you and runs circles around everybody else. But this is the world in which you're all living, and so you have a massive resource base from which to draw that in my mind most institutions are not taking full advantage of. The second thing is, and I don't know whether to call it crowdsourcing or what, is looking at what some municipal governments are doing, and so the New York City Open Data project, where they've taken a bunch of municipal data, basically made it available to the public, and the public is in fact organizing around some of these data, doing their own analytics, and then coming back to the city with suggested changes to the way the city allocates its resources, whether it's for trash pickup or otherwise. But I would just ask each of you to think about the data you have available to yourselves about your departments, your areas, your institutions, and each other's institutions. And ask yourselves whether or not you're really taking advantage of the data you all have access to now.
And I'll take it maybe a little bit different spin. You talked about how to get started. I'll talk about how to make it successful. And what I've seen is as far as measuring success with change, is that we've seen both good, bad, and in between, right? Sometimes you get lucky and things just go well. Oftentimes you measure the success of the change based on the nature of the change. Sometimes the change is relatively minor. You might be changing signatures on a form. That's a relatively small change. It may not impact a great number of individuals, and as a result, the need for communication is reduced. When you go and do something like what Ryan would help you with, which is a system implementation, which might take a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 2 years, 1 year, okay, to do, to put in a new system, that's obviously a much broader change. That's going to affect more individuals. And so the communication for that has to be much more crisp, much more planned out. I think it was Winston Churchill that said, failure to plan is planning to fail. Is that right? Well, that's kind of how I feel about some organizations' change methodology. It's like because you failed to plan to communicate up front with the individuals who are going to be impacted by it, they are not on board, right? How can they be? They don't understand what's going on. And in the vacuum of them understanding what's going on, they will simply fill in the blank, and there will be certain assumptions made about what they think is going to happen next month, or in 2 months, or in 3 months, or in 4 months. And next thing you know, you have something spiraling out of control that leadership can't contain or can't control.
Well, and I think just to add to that, not only is it communicating to them, but communicating with them, right? As you think about going through a large ERP implementation or even a procurement technology implementation, it really is about wallowing in their pain with them to really, truly, sincerely, and deeply understand what their pain is, and not just understand it, but then to actually execute against a solution to fix it, right? And not just tell them that you're going to, but to actually do it. And so I think it's also just a matter of really listening and understanding and feeling and wallowing in that pain with them, and then finding viable, executable solutions that'll fix it.
Yeah, I think I would add, on that topic of change, so I mean, I think there were a couple of questions mixed in here, and so I'll go back to a couple of points, but I think certainly, change can be, mandated down from the top. You can have, boards and legislatures and others say, hey, we need to change, and, here's what you need to do, and that can happen. I think there can be change that can come from the grassroots level, and I think things can bubble up. I think if, folks, there's every client that we go to, I think, you talk to the folks that are in the departments, in the units, they're doing the work. They know a lot about what the changes are, and or what needs to take place, or where the inefficiencies are, or where the duplication is. And so there, those opportunities can bubble up, and I think it's about really, helping folks to understand how to build the business case for change, and and what does that look like, and how do you move that forward. I mean, ultimately, when you hire a consultant, that's what we do, right? We come in and we're gathering information and data, and whether it's qualitative or quantitative, but we're building a business case for change and saying, you're at point A, you want to move to point B, and here's how you do it, and if you do it, here's what you're going to get. And so that can happen at any level in the organization. It can be a small incremental change. It can be something that's more transformational. I would say in both parts, and I think that's to Kelly's point about wallowing, and I like that word wallowing. It's very, very interesting. But you have to, it's so important to understand that when you're talking about change, there's an organizational dimension to it, which is, okay, we're restructuring, we're moving this, we're using a new process, we're using new technology, whatever. And so you have to deal with those pieces. But there's an individual piece to it. I mean, and the individual piece, in a lot of ways can be, the make or break on whether or not the change is going to be successful. And so when you're changing your organization, you're talking about affecting people, you're talking about their jobs are changing, you're talking about maybe there's new technology they need to use, there's skills that they need to have to understand that technology, their job maybe is being redefined, there's things they used to do that they don't need to and they're not sure. So that individual transition is a huge part of it, and it's often interesting, and no offense to the ERPs, but there's been definitely clients and actually other organizations where we've seen them go through ERPs, or big, I shouldn't even say ERPs, but big system transformations. And at some point it's like, oh my gosh, we just want to get the project over, we want to hit that go live date, and there's the big party. And they kind of look back a year later and they go, oh gosh, wow, we still feel like we're inefficient, we haven't gotten everything we want out of this, why are people complaining? A lot of times it's because they haven't focused on the individual piece. They haven't given the training. They haven't really said, does this person fit in the new job that we've just created? This system is going to cause them to work in different ways. So I would really, just really push on that individual piece, that when you're talking about change, if you're talking about, collaboration in your campus, if you're going to be talking about collaboration across campuses or across institutions, recognize that there's going to be a lot of change that's going to affect people, and you have to figure out what are the implications. We have one client right now, so I'm sure everybody, there was a session I know on shared services, and shared services is sort of the, maybe the term du jour these days. And we have a client that we've been working with on shared services. And it's interesting because everybody gets sort of fixated on the shared services. Oh, you're building out the new shared service center and what jobs are moving there and so forth. Well, one of the most important things you have to do in shared services is you have to also then look back at what's left behind in those units where you pulled all this stuff out. And sometimes the question is you're pulling out, partial FTEs or a 0.5 or a 0.2 or whatever it may be. And so then you have to go back and say, well, how do we make sure that that part of the organization is surviving this transition, and are we focusing on those jobs and those individuals and that piece of the change? So, there's a lot of different dimensions to this, but I would just, again, hopefully my point's clear, is this individual and the transitions as well as the organizational transitions I would certainly advocate for. The other thing I think that I'll go to on the kind of the change recap, and this is maybe kind of my laundry list of successful change initiatives. Maybe this one should have been a slide, but ultimately when we talk to our clients about change and they say, well, what's going to make this successful? And there could be other points to this, but we start with saying, the first thing you have to have is clarity around your goals. What are you trying to achieve? So clear end goals is essential. The second part is understanding the appetite for change. So if you're going to build, do something different, you're going to enter in some sort of a new collaboration, you need to understand your campus, your institution, your system. What's the appetite for change, and what do you need to do to effectuate that change? I already mentioned business cases and having data-driven and other business cases that will help you to understand where you're going and sort of support the direction. Leadership is essential. There's no question that leadership and a belief in what you're doing at the top and driving it at the top. Our most successful clients, I can guarantee you, are the ones that have their presidents, chancellors, provosts, and others that are, they're in town hall meetings with us. They're writing on websites and blogs and communicating with the campus continually about the initiative. So that leadership is very, very important. There's always going to be a need to prioritize, so you're always going to find, hey, we do this a little better, maybe well, guess what, the laundry list will get pretty long, so make sure that as you're going through a change initiative, you're constantly prioritizing, keeping your focus on that end goal. I think that's essential. Enterprise-wide, I use that term a fair amount with clients, and again, I think historically, whether or not universities have thought on an enterprise-wide scale, I think increasingly that's what you're seeing is, we need to think as, campuses or systems as enterprise-wide, and the change that we're making, how does it affect the entire enterprise, and really thinking in that manner. I'd be remiss if I didn't offer up engaging faculty and your stakeholders in the process, and so whether that's administrative staff, students, faculty, faculty senates, others, you have to engage your stakeholders in any change initiative, be it small or large. You have to understand who they are, how they're impacted, and make sure they're part of the process. Planning, obviously important, understanding risks, understanding politics. There's no question there are politics in universities. If there's not, then somebody can tell me, but I think there are. Building a realistic timeline to go along with that, and understanding having a plan that considers those risks and the politics you're going to have to deal with. And then I think most importantly, you need to track this. You need to monitor what you're doing. And so, how do you track your progress towards, from point A to point B, and are you on track? Do you have timelines? Are you meeting milestones? But then I think it's also another important part on change is how do you make sure you're sustaining that progress once the go live or whatever, the cutover, whatever magic word it is, when that happens, how do you make sure that you're continuing to track progress, sustaining that progress, and making sure that people aren't falling into old bad habits, or they're saying, hey, those shadow systems we all got rid of 6 months ago, well, we rebuilt ours because we thought we needed it. So all of those I think are kind of a laundry list, and I'll be happy to make sure we get these posted up, but I think those are all just important drivers or components of managing change and any type of initiative, be it something very locally campus focused or even broad collaborative initiatives. Any thoughts from my panel on that? Anything to?
For me, I'd say one, the stakeholder engagement is key, especially in the academic settings when, if you're trying to do enterprise-wide changes that are going to affect faculty. Two, credibility, know the topic you're talking about and learn, and admit when you don't know and, commit to research and figure out what the answers are. And three, for me, I think one of the biggest things that we've done to be successful in these really big kind of institution or system-wide projects is transparency and how we got to, the current state to what the new process is going to be. It's as much of, people can accept that, right? This might not be the most optimized, or I might not like the new way it is, but knowing how we got there, documenting all the issues, the communications, what the decision process was, it allows people to be much more comfortable with at least understanding how you got there and knowing that, all right, this was done in a rational way. All these people are at the table. These things were thought through, and then this decision was made. This is the way we're going, and that tends to get the buy-in a lot, I think, more broadly.
So I'm gonna throw this question over to Kelly. So Kelly, in the procurement world, what's sort of the baseline? What are the initiatives that people should be thinking about in the procurement world? From where you sit, what are the things that you see?
Oh, good grief. Well, a whole lot. It's such an exciting world. I think. A little bit, Bill Cooper and the crew, in two sessions ago, they did their procurement talk, which was really brilliant. I think the wave of sort of e-procurement and having that procurement technology to sort of channel requisitions and convert those into POs and things are sort of long past. And I think conversations I've been having with universities a lot lately revolve really around, I would say, three different components. And the first would really be around strategic sourcing technologies, right? So what technologies are out there where we can automate that sourcing or solicitation process, not only for ourselves internally and our end users who have to go out and get those 3 quotes, right? But also for our suppliers who have to continuously give us those quotes. Can we somehow automate that process, as well as the contracting process, right? So the contract management component. I think another hot topic right now around big data is sort of spend analytics tools. And what tools do we have in place in order to have really good information that's actually going to help us move the needle? Oftentimes, though, what I find is schools don't realize they don't have the data to feed the tools, right? And so I think we have to sort of start crawling before we run on that one. But schools are starting to sort of dip their toe in the water of spend analytics, that's for sure. And I would say sort of last but not least, I might have a couple more actually. It's so exciting. I'd say the last two, I'll do two, is total supplier sort of management. So really looking at how do we manage the entire supplier to collect their W-8, W-9 insurance information, all the way to even putting in supplier performance scorecards, right? So how do we actually measure and tell the supplier how we're going to measure their performance, and basically cut them if they don't, and really reward them if they do meet those requirements that we've put in place. And then I would say last but not least is travel and expense management. So really this sort of next wave or new frontier in the procurement world, in higher education in particular, now that folks feel like they've got e-procurement under their belt, is really looking at how do we implement a travel and expense program that's not only going to do a good job of managing that spend, and so we can get better discounts and more savings, but also how do we keep our faculty and our students safe around the world, where we have traumas around the world, and we need to make sure that we can access our students and get them out, or access our faculty and get them out in times of need. And so I would say travel and expense management is sort of that last wave of cool things happening in procurement.
Brian, anything?
I think, I kind of hit on it earlier, but the most thing that gets all the eyeballs going in the conversations I have is just how to use the data you have. And I think that can be overwhelming, and people talk about big data and things like that. But in each of your areas and your functions, you have data, right, that you could look at just from your own, what is your function and what you own, and what are your goals and what you're trying to get out of it. So to me, I would encourage everybody to go back and look at that, and what is it we're trying to accomplish, and whatever your portfolio is, what is ways to measure if we're getting there or not. And then that's a good way, one, to start to improve yourselves, and then two, that gives you a platform to collaborate, which I think we're going to start alluding to here in a second, with one another across your, within your institution, across your system, and then, across systems too. A lot of this, there's differences between each of the three different systems that are represented here, but there's a whole lot of overlap in what you're trying to do and get done in the functions. So that seems like a very natural and easy way to collaborate, that, you can control yourself, right? You know what you're doing and what you're responsible for, figure out who your peers are, and, reach out to them and talk to them about it.
Okay. I think I'd add two things, this could be a laundry list. I could, we could probably go on, but I'll just add a couple of points on this, and some of the things that I think we're seeing a lot of, and one is in the IT space, and really thinking about the cost of information technology at institutions, and we have, I think, many universities, it's you have. This mix of costs that's sort of centralized, and you know what it is, and then there's this decentralized IT spend, and you may or may not know what that is. And so we've been doing, an awful lot of work with clients and others that we just see that are doing this kind of work, where they're really thinking about how do we rationalize the IT organization, how do we rationalize our IT spend, how do we look at that and think about what we're spending things on, how we're organized, that balance between centralized and decentralized. Are there things we're spending money on in the IT space? Because again, technology changes so fast that we need to drop and stop spending money on, redivert those dollars into other things that we need to be spending money on in the IT space. But when you look at sort of the, where institutions spend money, obviously it's the labor side, and buildings are two big ones, but IT's, pretty far up the list, increasingly so. And so really thinking about IT expenditures at the IT organization and rationalizing and thinking about what that organization should look like is, I think, a very important thing for institutions to do, in today's environment. The other thing I think I would add in, again, another area that we're seeing a lot more interest in, and we're working with folks, really gets into the administrative support structures, really outside, what's known as sort of central administration. So this does get into that space that, has shared services in it. But I would offer that, shared services is sort of a particular destination, and so you're looking for a particular outcome. I think when you say, hey, we want to do a shared services model or put shared service centers in place across our institution, and while for some organizations that may be what they want to do and it might be the right answer, I think there are other institutions that say, well, what we really want to do is we're trying to find that optimal balance. We're trying to figure out where it makes sense to maybe have those centers, where it doesn't. Or maybe it's not even about shared service centers. It's just saying, figuring out that optimal balance between sort of what needs to be local, what can we pull more tightly central, and making sure that all the work that we're doing, all the process work that we're doing, that is being done in the right place, frankly, and that we have the right people with the right knowledge and skill sets and tools doing that work. I have a client right now, and they've actually taken that approach where they said, what we really want to do, we don't want to do shared services. What we want to do is we want to really build up and support the people that are out in our administrative units. And so we want to make sure that, roles and responsibilities are clear. We want to make sure, accountability and delegation is understood. We want to make sure we put training programs in place so that folks understand, gosh, I understand how to process a journal entry, or I understand how to do a labor transfer, whatever it happens to be, that they really understand and they have that technical expertise to do things correctly. And so really going down the list of what are the levers that we can push and pull on related to building up what we've called I think we were using the term sort of the administrative capability, if you will, of the folks that are out in the units and the schools and the colleges, those people that have to, sort of the jack of all trades, wearing, 3, 4, 5, 10 different hats on any given day, and really strengthen those folks so that they have, that capability to do what's needed and do it the right way and correctly and feel confident about what they're doing. So it's just a different twist on it, where this organization said, I know everybody's going shared services, but this is how we'd like to approach it because this is going to work better for us. Ultimately, I think that may lend itself towards some self-organization as they move, further downstream with this. Maybe some of the larger units in this institution maybe will say, yeah, well, we already have 6, 7, 8 people in the School of Medicine or whatever, they're going to be fine. But some of the smaller units may decide, hey, you know what, let's start to band together and collaborate more. So that's more of a, like herding sort of approach, I guess, versus saying, hey, shared services, this is where we want to go. So, again, I think there's very different paths to get to the same outcome. But again, what this is all about is, they want to make sure they have the right people doing the right things, they have the right skills and knowledge and tool sets, that they feel like there's internal controls behind all this, and that they can feel confident, frankly, when they go to their board that, yeah, we have people that know what they're doing, and they do it very well, and we've done all this work to really professionalize that group that's out in the unit. So. So again, an interesting twist, but something I just thought I'd throw out there as an example. So at this point in the program, I'm going to pause a little bit and see if there's any questions from the audience. We do have more questions, and so if there's not, we'll go back to those. But I'd like to, throw it open to the group here and see if there's any questions on anything we've talked about, or just something we haven't talked about, and you just like to throw out to our panel here.
I'm Emily Deere from UC San Diego. You talked about the important components of putting together a business case, including clear goals, stakeholder support, including faculty and end users on campuses, and transparency on getting transparency from the current state to the new state. For the UC Path Service Center, how did you tackle specifically those 3 items when you put together the business plan?
We didn't put together the business plan, so that was part of it. It was put together by another firm. The history of this is when the project started, they had a business case that was put together about cost rationalization and savings, and we're going to put these people in the shared service center and save a lot of money. But to Greg's point, a lot of that turns out being right. You're pulling out percentages of people's time when they wear multiple hats. And then there's actually another team that was going down to design what are these new, single processes that all 15 organizations are going to use. And initially it was kind of done in silos up in, the central project team, and there wasn't a lot of collaboration or engagement with the campuses and with the medical centers. And when we got asked to come in to do it, one of the things we changed was we said, all right, we got to put together, let's agree on what are the list of processes that we're going to align and make sure that all 15 organizations agree that what that list is. 2, let's put in a governance structure of how are we going to do it. So we set a deadline of, we're going to do this in 45 days. And to get there, we're going to have, build out a plan from that. You have the number of processes, we knew the number of organizations, we knew a timeline. We built up a bottoms-up plan of, okay, we're going to have to put together straw mans of the new processes. We have this much time for review and comment, this much time for, deliberation with all 15 organizations represented in the same room. This is how we're going to document issues, the transparency issue and the follow-up, and time to research those, revise the process, and then ultimately put it to a vote and have the escalation path, how does it get, if there is conflict, how do we get that up and resolve it? So putting all that structure in place and the thoughtfulness of it was, I think, the key to how we got everybody to agree to one set of processes. And like I mentioned before, we also were very conscious of this probably won't be the 100% most optimized process, but it's one that we could get all 15 organizations to agree to with their stakeholders in the room. And the makeup of how we did it, we pulled everybody into a room together. We had 2 kind of summits to go through this over several weeks. And we made sure we had the right people. We had academic personnel people on there, department administrators, and the central kind of administrators as well, just to make sure we had all those key stakeholder and engagement groups in there. So I don't know, does that help answer the question, or? Yeah. Sorry, I kind of walked through there, but yeah.
I mean, I'm familiar with what you're talking about, and
Yeah.
it's one thing to put things on paper, but when you're on a campus and
Yep.
watching it come to life, and you've talked for the last hour about how to make something come to life, I'm just wondering, how you take something that's written on a piece of paper and then actually bring it to a campus of 50,000 people and bring that to life with stakeholder support, users, and take it from a piece of paper to a new 50 to 100 new processes you
Yep.
talked about, rolling it out. So it seems like there's a little bit of maybe a challenge there.
Yeah, so what we're doing with the initial campuses that are going live first, it's happening in waves. So we've got teams at the campuses then that take right? The process that was agreed to that covers the unified, right, UC-wide process. And now at campus level, we've got teams that are saying, all right, so these are the number of boxes that happen in the shared service center or the system-wide process. What's left on campus, we have to redesign that. And that looks at, right, looking at the org structure, what functions stay on campus, what are those responsibilities in that process. So it's really, you have to almost repeat that same effort that happened system-wide. You have to do it at a campus level too, and build that same kind of group and engagement to really operationalize it and to answer your questions, right, of how it's going to work.
Hi, this question is for Kelly. So you mentioned 4 specific components. You mentioned strategic sourcing technologies and spend analytics tools, total supplier management, and travel and expense management. I'm curious to know if if you've come across a system or a platform that's been able to fully integrate all of these effectively into one. and if the reality is that they're all kind of a mishmash smorgasbord of all these different components, are there opportunities? Do you see any opportunities right now to kind of put those together? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I'm seeing a mishmash. I mean, truly, because right now, at least in the higher education landscape, there isn't really a technology provider that's got the market on each one of those components. Certainly, there are ERPs that have these components. There are companies, software as a service companies, that have these components, but not necessarily sort of as integrated as what most universities I'm at want to see. So they may have a supplier enrollment technology that integrates with their sourcing technology, which is really helpful and handy, but doesn't necessarily integrate properly with converting that solicitation into an awarded contract or an awarded requisition, right? And so I think there are nuances like that are sort of really frustrating when it comes to the business process and making that as seamless as possible for our end users, and really for us in procurement, So I guess the short answer is no, but I'm optimistic with where folks are headed, right? And as we talk to different ERPs, as we talk to different software as a service companies, I'm optimistic as to where they're going. But frankly, even when I worked in industry, I worked for Siemens for a number of years, and we had an SAP ERP, and we used their procurement technology, and we had a completely different system for our supplier registration, right? So even in industry, I would say just the technologies are sort of not quite where I think people in general want them to be. It's so disheartening, isn't it? It's a little disheartening. Yeah. Are you feeling that pain right now?
Yeah, just out of curiosity.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Hi, this question is related to procurement. Gabe Yossi from UC Davis. I work closely with UCOP as well. I'm in technology, and one of my roles is to work closely on procurement strategy for cloud services, in particular technology that are services. And I'm finding that our procurement models are really broken in terms of procurement strategies around technology services in particular, and the competitive bidding processes kind of start to break. The contract strategies, the supplier management strategies, they're just way behind the times to deal with those kind of technology. And so I'm wondering kind of what are you seeing your clients do, and how are you advising them to deal with these new realities of technology that are specifically services, and even more specifically cloud services?
Okay, so you might have a perspective on this as well.
Go for it.
So when you say sort of using that technology as essentially a managed service provider, right, with the technology itself. So as a catalog management tool, for example, to manage your catalogs on your behalf.
Many of the technologies we're using on our campuses are increasingly services, particularly cloud services like software as a service. So we'd buy a subscription-based software from a vendor, or Amazon Web Services to build our infrastructure. I find it's kind of breaking our procurement models, and our procurement folks are having a really hard time wrapping their heads around how to purchase these services under the current procurement rules.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, now you say under the current procurement rules. That's also interesting. There's a lot of interesting things you're saying. Yeah, I mean, I think certainly as we think about any technology acquisition, right? So if we're thinking about licensing a new spend analytics tool or a new contract management tool, I think there are sort of the basics of what we need to understand about that technology in and of itself. But I think there are also slight nuances behind the scenes of how you administer that technology that can get pretty challenging. As far as actually licensing that and going through sort of the negotiation process and contracting process of a technology license, is that where they're breaking down? Sorry if I'm missing the question.
Yeah, I think it's more because I think you're getting at it's not the typical, hey, we're going to license this and install it locally on our campus. It's, hey, we're buying services that are just out in the cloud, and for reasons that, it sounds like your folks. Right. It's. Right, it's $10 per person per whatever. It's some sort of a smaller license, per use type approach or something totally different. Yeah.
And what's hard is that every solution has a different sort of contract method, right? So to Greg's point, it might be per person, right, or per user. There are other software providers that do a transaction-based fee per invoice, for example, or batch of invoices. There's others that do a supplier fee to offset some of the costs that are associated, with the license itself. And so I think you definitely have to be aware of what the structure is and what they're basing the pricing off of. Some companies base it off of, your operating budget, right? And there's really not necessarily a rhyme or a reason to the number of licenses. It's just, your operating budget is X, therefore the license fee over a year or over 5 years is Y, So I think it's being acutely aware of what that contract structure is. I don't feel like that was helpful.
Or is it units going out and buying on their own?
Thank you. I think there's the how to buy issues, right? So that the procurement strategy is often difficult. I mean, we have competitive bidding rules, right? And if a contract is subscription-based, you pay it year over year, you're always going to have to do an RFP, no matter how small, because it'll always get to $100,000, right? And so we're often not moving fast enough in these procurement vehicles, and the business is going out and finding ways around it.
Yeah,
So,
that's one of the comments I was going to put on it. What I see at a lot of institutions is it goes to the sourcing thing, because you see like the same cloud product or SaaS product being bought like up to like 10 or 12 times by different units, because they can get it right because the thresholds are lower, but then you're not optimized, right? You've got like 12 different implementations of it going within one campus. And then, the other thing I would say that is probably worth looking at when you evaluate those is the total cost of ownership is very hard to drive at, because if you're not changing the software, it comes, here's what you get. You have to change all your processes and your integration points and everything like that. And the vendors are, quite frankly, right, they don't want you to think about that. So they say, right, you pay $2 a month per user, and that's what you get, and it's perfect, right? Everybody's got to adapt to this. Well, that's the issue. They have to adapt to it, and there's the rest of your ecosystem and everything. So I could definitely see how that would be, challenging, and it's kind of you have to change the construct of thinking about like TCO and everything when you evaluate.
Thank you. Any other questions? We have a minute or two yet, so I'm going to throw one question out to Tim. I think this was, on your list if there are no other questions. So, what process have you seen institutions go through to sort of identify possible collaboration opportunities? Have you seen anything like that? I know you have, because we've rehearsed this.
I have. We did rehearse this. That's right. I'm shocked I'm getting this question. My favorite project in probably the last 8 months or so was I worked for an institution on the East Coast, and what they were doing, it was the leadership of that institution came and said, regarding, it's in the area of research administration, they said, we don't feel like we're doing these things particularly well. We don't know that we may be, but we don't feel like we're doing them particularly well. We feel like there's some opportunities to gain from some efficiency. And so they approached it a little bit different than other clients of ours have approached it. And they said, we want to not only have you come in and do an assessment of our organization, but then we want you to go out and do an assessment of 5 other organizations that you deem to be our peers and see how they do it, and then come back to us with comments, observations from those institutions. And so that's sort of an example of the collaboration that we're talking about. So we went in and did an assessment of 5 post-award business processes. We were looking at award setup, we were looking at billing, financial reporting, award closeout, and accounts receivable. And they were saying, are there opportunities to gain from some efficiencies? Can we get better and reduce our total accounts receivable? Can we set up awards faster? They were taking some 45 or 60 days to set awards up to give PIs the ability to spend. Can we bill more efficiently? They weren't able to get through their entire billing portfolio within the month-long duration that they had to bill. So things were sort of leaking over from month to month to month without being billed. So obviously their unbilled balances are out of control. Their accounts receivable is growing, and they're saying, can we get better? So we went in and did an assessment of their organization, and then looked at peers, and we put together a peer list based on size of the institution, based on whether or not they had a medical school or not, based on whether or not they had a similar portfolio, if they were made up primarily of NIH or NSF type of awards. And then we went out, and also technology, wondering, were they a PeopleSoft shop, were they Oracle, were they SAP, what were they? And then we contacted those institutions that we deemed to be peers or aspirational peers. We arranged site visits for those campuses. We arranged meetings with those individuals on those campuses, and then they ultimately went through their business process. And they said, we did a survey in advance and said, do you agree that you do this X, Y, or Z, good or bad? And they said, well, we're good at billing and accounts receivable, but not so much on financial reporting. And they might say, we're really good at closing out accounts, but we can't really set them up particularly well. And so we focused our attention on those campuses and found out what it was that made them particularly effective, what it was that they did so well. Ultimately came back and delivered a report to the client that was then disseminated and shared with those 5 other peer institutions. And so collectively, they all benefited from understanding how they were all doing a certain thing particularly well. And so the benefit was 6 institutions wide. And that's sort of an example of the collaboration. That's a great example of the collaboration that we saw, that ultimately 6 institutions benefited from sitting down and saying, how can we do this better? Are there ways to improve what we're doing?
Thanks, Tim. Thank you. And you said something really interesting. It kind of just threw a random thought in my head. I mentioned earlier, one of our clients, it's the University of Kansas. They've been doing a lot of work on cost reduction, and through a much larger initiative, they arrived at the idea that they were going to do some work on shared services, but something you said, Tim, triggered it, and you said the word site visits. And when they were very early on in the planning phase of thinking about this, they said, well, let's go learn. Let's go learn from some of the places that have done this. And so they, our team in collaboration with theirs, literally got on planes and they went to, I think it was Oregon and maybe New Hampshire or some of the places that have been paving the pathways and shared services for a long time. And they really spent time with the folks that have done that and, paved the trails and said, okay, what worked, what didn't work? And really began to understand and learn from their peers and from some of the institutions that have been there. And so again, I think higher ed is a great place because there's a lot of knowledge sharing, there's a lot of information sharing that goes on, and and I really think that when you're thinking about collaboration, it does help sometimes to say, well, let me get out of my box, let me get out of my office, off my campus, let me go somewhere else, let me see the ideas that somebody else has already put into place or they're already working with, and let me just sort of understand if I can bring that back to my campus or how it would fit in my institution. So anyway, it was just sort of a thought I wanted to throw out there. I think that it really can work and really does help. I think we're close to the bottom of the hour on this, and I'm going to leave this maybe just real quick to the panel, anybody that wants to throw in. So for all the folks that are in the room here, what can they do on Monday? What can they go back and think about or take to the staffs or the teams that work with them each and every day? Any advice?
For me, I'll hit on what I talked about earlier. You can go, right, you can try to use some of the data to assess where you're at with your own portfolio, what you're responsible for, and you can reach out to your peers and colleagues. You know, one of the things that Tim and I see a lot, like in UC, all the post-award research directors, a couple years ago, they started just getting on the phone and having a call once every couple months and, right, talking through some of the pain and issues they're having, and it, you know, spiraled down into a path where they actually get together in a room, have formal kind of summits and whatnot periodically. But, you know, it doesn't have to start that big. You can start by, right, you all have peers and colleagues, you know, your different institutions within your system and across the systems. So just find some areas to, pick their brain on. That's probably the easiest way.
This is one of the downsides of collaborating and discussing in advance, because other people take your ideas and your answers.
Sorry.
So I mean, I'll take a slightly different spin related to the theme, that I mentioned earlier with respect to data, and that's, what I'd suggest is that, you all look at the data you have available to you, both about your organization and about your sort of enterprise, and decide where, what data you could free up and make more public. And ask others with whom you're sharing your data to share theirs as a way of sort of a quid pro quo way of reducing risk, because you're showing each other's, so to speak. So that's what I think you can do on Monday.
We're going in order? I'll go.
Sure, go.
So this might sound very basic, but I think the idea of aligning sort of your tasks and your job with your boss's goals, right, and your goals with his goals, because ideally his or her goals are aligned with then his or her bosses, and that's aligned with the university mission, right, ultimately. And so I think just one thing you can do is just sort of sit back and really think about what you're doing on a daily basis and whether or not it really is in line with your savings objectives or mitigating risk for your university, or providing the best service to your PIs and lab directors and business officers. So just think about your goals, I guess, and make sure they're aligned with your bosses.
I'm going to use the analogy of a book club. I think a book club is much more effective if you show up having read the book, okay? So you have a much more productive dialogue. So I'm going to keep it real simple and say, I think before you can really start effectively collaborating, you've got to look at what you're doing. Say, what are you doing? Literally get an inventory and say, what is it that I do on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week basis, on a month-to-month basis? I would personally compare that to your job description and see if it agrees. And say, what am I not doing? What I am doing is sort of do a fit gap of sorts. Make sure, like was mentioned earlier, it fits into the mission of the organization, the mission of your office. And then I would get on the phone and I would start reaching out to your peers in the industry within this network that you formed this week, and talk to individuals of similar title, talk to individuals of similar offices, and understand how they're going about working on the same tasks that are on your list, and then talking about ways to improve those things.
Good call.
So really quick, just to wrap up in line with that, and sort of in line with the sort of adding value back to the mission and thinking about it from that point of view, very much on point, Tim. I would say, one of our clients, actually a shared client Tim and I have right now, we're helping them in a particular functional area, and one of the most frequently heard phrases I think we hear when we go into clients and say, hey, we need to improve this particular area, can you help us? And you start to get into the weeds with people and talk about what they're doing. And you say, well, why do you do that? And they say, well, it's because we've always done it that way, right? So it's really about going back to your staff and saying, everything Tim said is right on, and saying, well, are there things that we're doing because we've always done it that way? And let's really understand, why are we doing these things? Does everything we do add value? Is it, if you told your end stakeholder, your students, your faculty, your parents, the legislature, say, hey, we're doing X, would they all look at you and go, okay, I get it, I understand why you're doing that, that makes sense. But if you think they'd answer that question and look at you like, wow, crazy, why are you doing that? That doesn't make any sense. Then, maybe that's an opportunity to really rethink how you do things and how you could be more effective and provide, additional value back to the mission. So, with that, I think we are at the end of our session. I do thank all of you very much for participation, for listening with us, and frankly, for inviting us to be here. We certainly do appreciate it. It was very enjoyable to be part of this session, as well as to be part of the other sessions and listen today, early on. And I now have my new catchphrase from Dr. Massey. What is it? Holes, gaps, and walls, I believe. So sounds good. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks.